Today we are taking a look back at the 2018 NHL Draft. We're going to revisit the top 10 picks and redraft them based on all the information we've learned on these players in the past 3 years. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're redrafting the 2018 NHL Draft class. We're only doing the top 10 selections for today. Of course, in the past, we've done these types of videos before where I've reviewed and redrafted previous and other NHL draft classes. There's a variety of those videos on the channel if you have not seen them before. And some of them we may do again because, of course, over time, information changes. The players obviously play differently. They improve or regress, and the stats change, and it kind of changes your opinion on where they might go if this redraft was a possibility to actually redo. So, of course, this is not something that can actually take place. We can't go back in time. And, of course, a lot of these players, like I said, they've all developed a little bit differently. So, if you had a chance to go back, you very well might make a different selection today than you did a few years ago. So, generally speaking, I don't like to do these too soon after being drafted. This is probably the closest we've come in about 3 years. I may consider taking a look at the 2019 draft and redoing that one here soon. But of course, if we do that, it's something that I would probably want to do again in a year or two's time, just to give these players a chance to kind of reprove themselves. Now, the 2018 NHL Draft was one that was going into it. Everybody progressed that Dahlin was going to be the #1 overall pick, and he was going to be a generational type defenseman. And even though so far in Buffalo he's looked good, I don't know if we can really call him a generational talent at this point. Now, could he become that? At this point, I'm not so sure. Like, I still think he's got a couple more gears to find and continue improving. He's been in a tough situation on a not-so-great Sabres team, but would he go first overall today if this were able to be redone? I know there's a lot of defensemen in this draft that are probably going to be moving up the ranks, and I think that you're going to notice a lot of the top 10 players here are D-men. Now, of course, I kind of got the idea and inspiration to make this video after a recent article from Scott Wheeler in The Athletic where he recently reviewed this draft class. After looking over some of his selections in a redraft, I kind of agreed with a lot of them, but not all. And it's like, you know what? I haven't done a redraft video here in a while, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go at #1 and work our way down and kind of go through this. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment and just review the original top 10 selections that we're going to be looking at here today. Of course, Dahlin did go first overall to the Sabres out of Frölunda in Sweden. No big surprise there going into this draft. That was what was widely expected to happen. #2 was a lottery pick won by the Carolina Hurricanes, where they drafted Andrei Svechnikov. Of course, born in Russia, but played junior hockey for the Barrie Colts in the OHL. The #3 pick was also a lottery victory by the Montreal Canadiens, where they selected center iceman Jerperi Kotkaniemi out of Finland. The #4 pick belonged to the Senators, where they picked Brady Kitchuk out of Boston University. #5 was Barrett Hayton going to the Arizona Coyotes from the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League. Filip Zadina, who was projected by many to be a #3-4 spot, ended up falling a little bit down to #6 in Detroit. So they selected him, of course, born in the Czech Republic, played his junior hockey for the Halifax Mooseheads. #7 was the Vancouver Canucks selecting Quinn Hughes from the University of Michigan. Quite a dynamic defenseman that they got themselves there. #8 was the Blackhawks selecting Swedish defenseman Adam Boqvist. Now, he took a little longer to develop, but that wasn't a shocker. Many suspected Boqvist would take a couple of years to really play any kind of regular minutes in the NHL. But now that he's there, he's certainly looking pretty good. The New York Rangers selected Vitaly Kravtsov, #9 overall. At that point, was kind of viewed upon as going off the board a little bit. Certainly, Kravtsov was ranked a bit lower by many scouts at that point out of the KHL. The Edmonton Oilers, then at #10, selected Evan Bouchard, defenseman from the Ontario Hockey League's London Knights, who many viewed as being a very offensively gifted defenseman, could be real solid on a power play. 3 years later, Evan Bouchard has not played any kind of regular role at all with those Edmonton Oilers. So now let's get back into the redraft, knowing what we know now about these 10 players, as well as other guys that went even below them in the draft, who would go first overall all the way down to 10 here, giving it today. Now, starting up first overall, the Buffalo Sabres, even though originally they selected Rasmus Dahlin, I think today with a do-over, they would select defenseman Quinn Hughes from Vancouver, and he would join his brother Jack as the first brother duo to go first overall in the NHL. To me, Quinn Hughes has become the more dynamic defenseman here out of between him and Dahlin. Out of all the D-men in this draft, fair to say that he's off to the best start of his career. He has 97 points on 129 games, playing a prominent role with the Vancouver Canucks. And I think right now, if he were in Buffalo, they'd be quite pleased with his development compared to what we've seen in Dahlin. Not that Dahlin's been terrible or anything. I don't think he's in line to be a draft bust. But as of right now, he's not living up to the number one hype. But like I said, a lot of that could be because of the coaching development and just the overall team that he's been on. So time will tell if things get any better or not. Now, the number 2 selection, of course, belongs to the Carolina Hurricanes. And yes, I have them staying with Andrei Svechnikov. Like I said, played for the Barrie Colts. He's got a solid start to his career in Carolina. Certainly produces at a good level as 140 points in 205 games, including 59 goals so far. You could say that he is the highest scoring player in this draft class thus far. And to get that many goals and points in the first 200 games of his career is a really, really good start. So there's no reason why Carolina, in my opinion, would end up going in any kind of a different direction. Now, number 3 was a controversial pick in a way. Montreal Canadiens, of course, do you remember at the draft when they announced this pick, this lady in the crowd, I'll never forget this. She had that look of shock and despair on her face as they made the selection. But of course, the Habs were, really looking for a center iceman. And Kotkaniemi, by many, was ranked lower, somewhere to go to 10 to 15 range. Some had him around 8, 9. And he was the top center. The center icemen in this draft were not plentiful. So, it was looked upon as going off the board. But today, the Montreal Canadiens would get Rasmus Dahlin, even though they really needed a center at the time. Things have changed a bit within their future. They've traded for Nick Suzuki. They're not so weak at that position as they were at that point in time. And considering Dahlin is still on the board, they have themselves an opportunity to grab a real solid top pair defenseman. And especially knowing what we know now about the future of Shea Weber, I can imagine that the Montreal Canadiens would take that opportunity to grab the Swedish defenseman to build around here. So to me, Dahlin would drop from 1 to 3, and the Montreal Canadiens would go in a different direction here instead of taking the Finnish center iceman. Now at the number 4 pick, the Ottawa Senators would remain taking Brady Kitchuk. Brady Kitchuk's been an absolute force in Ottawa so far. He has put up 125 points in 198 games, including 60 goals. 60 goals amongst his draft class here is the most out of all the players selected in that draft class. Now, of course, Andrei Svechnikov is only one behind, but still, Brady Kitchuk is looking like he is going to be a real stud player for a long time for these Ottawa Senators. Now, at number 5, the Arizona Coyotes would go in a different direction here. They would not be selecting Barrett Hayton, even though he still looks like a decent prospect. He's really yet to develop into anything consistent. They would instead take current Philadelphia Flyers forward Joel Fairby. Fairby has had a real solid start to his NHL career. Joel Fairby would certainly be moving up in this draft. He went number 14 to the Flyers. He's at 59 points in 107 games. Really had a solid year last year, scoring at a real solid pace. And at this point in their careers, Fairby is outplayed Hayton by a substantial margin. So again, the Coyotes, with this selection, like the Montreal Canadiens, were considered going off the board. Hayton was a pretty highly touted prospect, but not this highly. And at this point, it kind of shows that maybe the Coyotes had some better options here. At number 6, the Detroit Red Wings originally selected Filip Zadina from the Halifax Mooseheads. Of course, he fell in the draft, and it was kind of considered and looked upon as being somewhat as a gift. Like, they couldn't pass up on him after Ottawa and Arizona did, where he was, ranked 3-4 by many NHL scouting services. But right now they would take Swedish defenseman Adam Boqvist. Now, having this draft to be a redo here, if we could really do this, would they then take Mo Seider in the following draft? I think they probably would, but can you imagine how strong of a blue line they'd be building if they were able to get a solid D-man here instead? Not that Zadina won't be a good player for them. I still have a lot of confidence in Zadina, but I think he's going to be more of a 20-goal scoring middle six winger at this point, whereas at the time of his draft, he was kind of viewed upon as being a top center. He was kind of viewed upon as being a top line player that would maybe produce even more offense. And still early, so we'll see if things change. But right now, I would project him and his future progress be a little bit lower here in the lineup. Now, with the number 7 overall selection, the Vancouver Canucks would not be able to select Quinn Hughes because he's first off the board to the Buffalo Sabres here in this redraft. So they would take another real solid defenseman here on the board, and they would take Noah Dobson, who originally went a little bit lower in this draft to the New York Islanders. Now, Noah Dobson, to me, is a player that would fit nicely there in Vancouver. Again, if they could have done this, it could have changed some other future plans and trade signings, etc., that they've made. But Dobson, he's got good size, good skill. And with the Islanders organization, he's kind of, been held back, playing a smaller role. Barry Trotz doesn't want to rely too much on the youngster, given all the other, veterans they have on their blue line. But overall, I think Dobson would be the next best defenseman available here. And even given the forwards that are options, I think he would be the best selection for Vancouver. If they can't get Hughes, to me, that's their next best plan here. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks at number 8 originally took Adam Boqvist here out of Sweden. Of course, we have him going a little bit higher in this draft to Detroit. So I have them taking yet another pretty solid young defenseman, and that's Ty Smith, who originally was drafted a little bit lower in the first round by the New Jersey Devils. Now, Ty Smith is a player, he went number 17 overall, had a real solid start to his rookie year last year. The second half of the year was not as good and as productive, but he showed what he's capable of, and I think the Devils are really in for a treat with this guy longer term. He's a good leader as well, good on both ends of the ice. He put up 23 points in 48 games last year after completing his junior hockey for Spokane in the Western Hockey League. So to me, without having the original option here on the board, I think he's the next best defensive option here and best player available as well for Chicago at this selection. Now at number 9, the New York Rangers originally selected forward Vitaly Kravtsov. And you know what? He still has time to prove that he's worth that number 9 pick. But at this point in his career, he hasn't really proven that yet. But one player that they actually drafted later, who we would have moving up in this draft and still be a Ranger, would be Kandre Miller. Kandre Miller has had a real solid start to his career with the Rangers organization. Miller ended up playing 53 games, put up 12 points. Certainly has room to grow and develop for sure. But like I said, within this draft class, to me, there would be a run on defenseman here for quite a stretch from number 6, 7, 8, 9 in this part of the first round, given what's really out there. I mean, the Rangers obviously ended up getting Miller at a later pick anyways, but I think at this point, if they had a chance for a do-over, he would be the first one taken, and Kravtsov maybe with the next pick. The Edmonton Oilers originally selected Evan Bouchard of the London Knights, a top-rated offensive defenseman. Given how they've made changes to that blue line, and he's 3 years later not even playing anywhere near a prominent role for them, they would make a change to this selection, and they would take the former number 3 pick, Jerperi Kotkaniemi, who originally went to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I think this is probably the part in the draft that many thought would be better suited for him, and Kotkaniemi to go and to be picked and selected here. And to me, if you look at the Oilers, and one of the things they're missing is a real solid number 3 defensive two-way center, and Kotkaniemi could certainly be that player for them. If he could be eased into that lineup a little bit easier than he was in Montreal and end up being a number 3 center behind McDavid and Draisaitl, to me that would have been a much better positioning for his career. So far, his offensive numbers are quite low, 62 points in 171 games. I know his points totals in the playoffs are a little bit better, of course, but still comparing him to guys like Svechnikov and Tkachuk in the top 4, and his point total, they're just absolutely nowhere near it. I mean, Brady Kitchuk has more than double the amount of points that he has in slightly more games. So it's really not close. And to me, I know it was a bit of a stretch for them to take this player at number 3, and he's proving that. Now, I know Habs fans might be upset by some of the comments I've made. I don't think he's a bad player. I don't think badly of Kotkaniemi. I just think if you had a chance for a do-over, you have some better options there, and that he would not go number 3 overall today based on what we've learned in him as a player. I think there's a good chance he could have, continued to develop in Finland a little bit longer and really take his time getting to the NHL and be better prepared. So those are my top 10 selections in this 2018 NHL Redraft. Of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts, your opinions on my selections down below. Let me know what order you think these players would go in here today. Who would be the top 10 selections in this draft if these teams could do the draft over again? Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.